I declare war. This video is in response to Oshay Duke Jackson. He did a video about Alton Sterling, and people should know by now Alton Sterling was killed by the police um, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The police threw him to the ground, they pinned him down, and one of the officers, at point blank range, put a gun in his chest and fired multiple times, killing Mr. Sterling. They say he was reaching for a gun, but there is no way that he could have grabbed a gun because the police had his arms pinned down and there's no indication that he was reaching for a gun. He didn't make any statements or any threats about reaching for a gun. That's according to eyewitnesses, and that's according to the video. So here we have another example of a black man killed by the police without justification. We have another example of how black lives do not matter to many of these white police officers. So instead of expressing his outrage towards this unjustified killing of another black man by some stinking police, this guy Oshay Jackson decides to attack black women. He uses this as an opportunity to blame black women for this tragedy. Instead of calling for a trial for this pig who killed his brother, Oshay Duke Jackson wants to put the black woman on trial. He wants to blame black women for police brutality. He says that black women in these single parent households led by black women, they don't guide their children properly. They don't teach them how to interact. They don't give them discipline. And because of that, police brutality exists. Because of that, a lot of black men end up dead at the hands of the police. And this guy, Oshay Jackson, actually had the nerve to say that if we were able to correct the black woman, then that would solve the police brutality problem overnight. See, this logic is flawed on so many different levels. You know, it's flawed because it's a primary example of respectability politics. It's the idea that if black people behave properly, then they can behave their way out of oppression. Then they can magically solve problems of police brutality and other racial problems in our community. And also, this guy had the nerve to say that police brutality is not a major problem in our community. So before I attack his main point about black women being the cause of the problem, I'll first address this whole issue about whether or not police brutality is a major problem in our community. Without a doubt, it is a major problem. Black men make up 6% of the U.S. population. But we make up 40% of the unarmed people killed by the police. There's something wrong with that picture. And from what I understand, that's like 7 times the rate of killings for white men. Black men are targeted by these police. Black men are racially profiled by these police. Black men are presumed to be dangerous criminals when police encounter us. That's a problem. You know, so he wants to blame this problem of police brutality on the existence of a large number of single parent households led by black women. Well, first of all, police brutality has been a problem from the very beginning. Ever since the police have been formed, black people have had problems with police brutality. In fact, when our families were more intact, when we had more nuclear families with a man and a woman married, we experienced even more police brutality. You know, if we look back at the old footage from the civil rights era, where the police were able to openly brutalize black people without any kind of consequences. And to a certain extent today, they are able to do the same. But we see video footage of police sicking dogs on black people, blowing fire hoses on black people, beating black people with batons simply for trying to exercise their right to vote or their other uh, civil rights, like being able to eat where they want to eat or stay at a certain hotel or whatever. For those basic things, they were brutalized by the police. That was when black families were intact, when you had um, black male patriarchy. So obviously, the family structure is not the reason why we are victims of police brutality. Also, his whole analysis is faulty because many of the victims of police brutality and victims of racist attacks are often people who were raised either in families where you had both parents in the households or families where the father or some other male figure was influential and a key part of that person's life. Despite that, they have been victims of police brutality and victims of white vigilantism. You have the example of the brother Jordan. I can't remember his first name, but this young brother Jordan, I mean, he was raised in a two-parent household. The police, well, not the police, this white man thought that this brother was playing his music too loud. So what did he do? He fired shots into the vehicle that the brother was in, killing that brother, simply for playing his music too loud. The fact that that brother was raised in a two-parent household did not protect him. You have the example of Trayvon Martin. Even though his parents were separated, his father was an important part of his life. In fact, he was at his father's house when he was killed. You know, he was in the neighborhood where his father lived, coming home from a convenience store. When George Zimmerman spotted him and saw him as suspicious, when George Zimmerman followed him, when George Zimmerman provoked an altercation, George Zimmerman didn't know if he was raised in a single-parent household or a two-parent household. He didn't took that into the equation when he decided to provoke this altercation that ultimately led to Trayvon Martin being shot through the heart. And there are other examples of young black men who have two-parent households that still are victims of police brutality. So we have to get rid of this notion that somehow the fact that somebody's in a single-parent household, that's the cause of their death, when there are plenty of examples of people who had fathers in their lives and they were still victims of police brutality. Also, we have to deal with the fact that there are many black men and women who were raised in single-parent households, who were taught how to interact with the police, who know how to interact with the police. In fact, when you look at the sheer numbers, if you want to blame single-parent households led by women for the problem, then there would obviously be more police brutality, given the fact that 70%, according to some statistics, of black households are led by single black women. You know, just based on that number, there would be higher percentages of police brutality if it was based solely on those numbers. So this guy is basically making all kinds of generalizations. He's taken a few examples and using those to make generalizations. And another point is this. There are plenty of examples where black men and women obey the police officer and they are still killed by these police. So it's not always a situation where somebody is non-compliant, where somebody is resisting or whatever. It's not always that kind of situation. For instance, this brother, Philando Castile, According to his girlfriend, who was doing a live stream shortly after the brother was shot by the police officer, that brother listened to the officer. That brother went out of his way to try to explain to the officer that he had a gun and that he was legally licensed to hold that gun or to possess that gun. He went out of his way to follow the police officer's instructions. The officer told him to pull out his wallet, to give him his wallet. So the brother reached for his wallet, and this police officer killed him. Shot him through the arm, shot him multiple times. So the lack of discipline is not the answer to the problem. Because there are examples, again, just like that example, where brothers have followed the instructions of these stinking cops and they ended up dead. So it's not that simple. And the stats bear it out. The stats of disproportionate targeting of black people, disproportionate killing of black people, all of those things point to a systemic problem that can't be cured by behaving properly for these stinking cops. Being a good little Negro is not the answer to our problems. As others have said, people want to blame police brutality on how these young people dress because they sag their pants or they wear their hat tilted to the side or to the back, or they wear certain flashy clothes. They think that because of that, the police label them as a criminal and treat them as such. Well, back in the day, our people used to wear suits and ties. They used to dress real dignified. Most people used to dress like that. Did that stop those stinking police from brutalizing us? Of course not. If we look at the civil rights footage, the footage from the 50s and the 60s, we'll see that the police didn't care how a Negro was dressed. They still treated that black man or woman like a second-class citizen. They still went upside their head with a baton. There are plenty of pictures of well-dressed black people with blood on their shirts and on their heads as a result of police brutality. Not too long ago, there was a picture of a young brother who was trying to go to some party, and the police went upside his head, and he was bleeding. That brother, I don't know if he's raised in a single-parent household or a two-parent household, but that brother was a respectable brother, somebody going to school, somebody in a fraternity, somebody that doesn't fit the so-called stereotype. But the police didn't care. There's the example of, this respected journalist, I can't remember his name, but his son attends Yale or some other Ivy League school, and the police harassed him. They didn't care what school he attended when they harassed him. And there are countless examples of black people being disrespected regardless of their education, regardless of their profession. I've been stopped and harassed by police. And I'm a professional black man, an educated black man. They don't care nothing about that. Just like they don't care anything about the president of the United States. This brother went to the best law school, Ivy League, everything. He was a senator, now he's the president of the United States, but to these white races, that brother is nothing but a damn ape to them. They have depicted him as a monkey. They have depicted him as a witch doctor. Despite all of his education. That's how they view him. So you can't educate your way out of oppression. You can't tap dance your way out of oppression. You can't yes sir boss your way out of oppression. There's something wrong with this system. And as long as we don't address the fundamental nature of the criminal justice system and the police power structure, then we will always have these situations of police brutality. We will always have these problems. And, I want to make one other point that I've made in my other video response to you. And that's this: these women do not become single parents by themselves. They don't have immaculate conceptions. Obviously, there's some man involved somewhere. Obviously, some man impregnated these women. And obviously, that man has some kind of bearing on how to raise his children. What kind of man, what kind of real man would abandon his child and not try to guide his child properly? And just leave it up to the mother to raise the child? That's not right. And such a man can't turn around and point his finger at the black woman and blame her for the outcome. That's just wrong. Now, I saw a video. I didn't finish watching it. I saw the title of it from this sister. And I was like, wow, that title was kind of harsh, because she was saying that black men are afraid to wage war against the police. And she also, had another video where she was talking about how black men are more concerned about weave and all this and that than they are concerned about injustice and white supremacy. And when I see a video like yours, it's hard to argue with that sister. Because so many of these people have been so punkified and so sissified that they don't have a pair of balls. They don't have a pair of balls that will enable them to stand up and confront injustice, to speak out against police brutality. Instead of doing that, they would rather cannibalize their own people, their own black woman, and essentially defend these stinking, no good, racist, killer cops. Because that's basically what you did. You took all the burden off of the actual cop who squeezed the trigger on that brother. You said, oh no, he's not to blame. The cop that squeezed the trigger on that brother, he's not to blame for the killing. His black mother is. I think that mentality is sick. I think that mentality is disturbing, to say the least. And, I know that some people are probably going to come to this video and say, you're a simp and all that kind of stuff. They're going to say I'm a simp for doing this video. I don't care about that. I reject those silly little childish juvenile labels. I reject them outright. And, the other day I was reading this article in the Washington Post. And it talked about a study that was done. A study of video game players. They did a study of people playing Halo 3. That's an interactive video game. And they found that the men who were winners at that game, they found that those men were courteous. They were courteous to women and they were courteous to men. And they also found that the men who could not play the game properly, the men who did not have skills to play the game properly, they were the ones who attacked women. They were the ones who harassed women and made all kinds of sexist comments to women while playing these games. They were literally the losers. The losers were the ones who felt the need to attack women. And they went on to talk about how that was really something that harkened back to Neanderthal times, when the weak men who were fighting for some kind of status within a hierarchy, who were at the bottom of the totem pole, basically would be aggressive towards women because they felt threatened by women. Women threatened their fragile position in the hierarchy. And that's how these weak-minded people are on YouTube. They want to attack strong black men and call them simps and want to attack women simply because they're women. They want to make all kinds of generalizations about black women because these men are literally losers, just like the losers in that study. I mean, what kind of person would take advice from somebody like you? A man who talks about, like, I don't hear you talking about as much of information as you provide about relationships and black men and black women. I don't hear you talking about some stable relationship that you're involved in. But what I do hear you talking about is how you find so much pleasure and release in masturbation. I mean, what kind of intelligent person would follow an example like yours? That's just a real life question, that I want answers to. I mean, if I'm seeking relationship advice, I want to get advice from somebody that's married, somebody that's in a stable relationship, someone that is a model for success, not some crab hater. Some of these guys that want to bash women so bad, many of these men don't even know what it's like to be in a real relationship. Many of these men are just bitter and full of hatred because of a few bad experiences. Instead of attacking the women, these brothers need to do some self-reflection. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect. I have a lot to learn or whatever. I think all of us can reflect on ourselves, but I think the problem is, when you don't reflect on yourself, all you do is point the finger outward at others. And that's what these weak people do. And again, I'll start from what I said at the beginning. I just wonder what kind of background this brother had. Like, what kind of mother did he have? What kind of relationship problems did he have? So those are my thoughts about this issue. And before I conclude, I'm not going to say that a single parent household is a model household. Obviously not. Obviously I prefer that we try to build strong black families with a mother and a father. I think that that's the best model for us as a people. But let's not blame black women for every problem under the sun. So those are my comments. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.